They don't let anyone help them inside the prison, and they give him just a food once inside the prison, and one meal, and they don't let anyone from outside to help them.
We speak with Valeria. Can you tell us what changed on Lesvos since the implementation of the EU-Turkey deal?
Yeah, the situation on Lesvos changed completely when this deal was implemented, because before Lesvos was simply like a short step on the route of people who were looking for safety and a decent life. And they came over the sea to Lesvos, and then they entered European territory. And then they were able to continue their journey first in Greece and then along the Balkan route. And then, yeah, on the one hand, of course, the borders were closed, but on the other hand, now Lesbos has become some sort of open-air prison. So the people are caught here for months, and I know some people that have been here for 17 months, so it's like a very long time. And on the island, they have to stay in camps, so most of them don't have the opportunity to live in a flat or anything. So they have to live behind barbed wires for months in very bad conditions. So it's like the frustration level is very high. Self-harm is extremely high. Many people suffer from depression because they stay in a state of limbo where they cannot know about the future. So they cannot plan anything, they're not allowed to work, they have to live in a camp. They don't have enough food in many cases, nothing they can do with their life. So they are like just caught on the edge of Europe in a state where they cannot move on. So the whole islands were transformed.
وكون لكود داوكاري من أويا.
As a leader of Kurdish people, we demand.
نسقي هسا كود لم تسيري على جزيرة ليزبوس ليونانا.
Near of thousands of Kurdish people inside the Lesvos.
كردكان شارع نسيان ديارنيا صالك دمينو دواي صالك رفض بكرد.
All Kurdish people, near all Kurdish people, they stayed in about a year inside the camps, and they don't like its rejection, like after all.
أو كردانا بو راك هكيو آثار اللي ضدي خويا هي كيش كمالات هي كيش سياسي هي كيش دركي هي دجمري كل زورة بو كردكان حاليا وكروتشا كمبر أوروبا.
All Kurdish people are running from Kurdistan or any part of Kurdistan. We are running of government or politics or any reason we're running because of reason. We are not here just because of like anything.
كردكان داوي أويان هي لهمو أوروبا والاتحاد الأوروبي وصليبي أحمر ما فيني ودولتي ما في مروف الهموتي أنا بين بهانا كردكان الرفض ديبوت بو كرد رايكي.
We demand of all European UN and the Red Cross and any organization who have a bit human right, and we want to stop rejection for all Kurdish people.
كردكان لقى الرفض ورقرن دائما سجن أنا كان سيمان ويا ديبورتي تركيا أنا تركيا يك جزمني سركي كردا.
And when they give a deportation for any Kurdish, they put them inside a prison for 3 months, and then they deport them to Turkey. And Turkey the most important enemy of Kurdish people.
داواکارم ئەو ڕەفز و دیپۆرتەنە بێ بۆ کورد لەبەرەوەی کوردستانی لە مەترسیایە بۆیە هەمی هاتووەتە ئێرە.
We demand to stop deportation for Kurdish people and stop everything because we want Kurdish people to have a right here and stop deportation for all Kurdish people. In the whole world, they know the Kurdish people don't agree with the Turkish government. So why they send Kurdish people to Turkey? They said because I'm Kurdish. When I was in Turkey, they put me in the prison and they didn't give me any food in a near 2 weeks.
اوه دفروشا وقت ارتشی آزاد دفروشا ارتشی آزاد ملت یا کرد همون که سجن دکت دگره ترکیه دفروشا ارتشی آزاد به پاری دبی برونا ارتشی آزاد رونا ارتشی آزاد جلنا ارتشی آزاد تا هاتی کشتنی نه هاتی کشتنی ماه
ارتشی آزاد چیش یادیه
اوه پارتیه پارتی ارتشی آزاد پارتی ارتشی آزاد
چه پیدیکه
نه بگیکن نه جاش حره دجی اوه دجی ما مروفای دژی انسانیتی دژی همه دژی وقت اردوغان دیکتاتور فاشیستی سر روی اف دنیای
سر کیش دولته سوریه
The Turkish people grab Kurdish people and they sell them to a party inside Syria. These parties grab the Kurdish people and they make them fight and if they don't fight they kill them.
Yan defroşu Daesh yan defroşu Jabhatistan.
Or they sometimes they sell them to the ISIS.
Are there refugees who are allowed to leave the island, and how does this procedure exactly work?
So few refugees are allowed to leave the island first if they are accepted at one point and have some sort of an international protection status. They are allowed to leave the island to the Greek mainland. But others are allowed in case after a while only when they are classified as vulnerable, which means, for example, like pregnant women or when they are like seriously like victims of torture are supposed to be classified as vulnerable, which doesn't always work. And on the other hand, if they apply for family reunification, so that's a possibility how to leave the island and have the interview in Essence then, but they have to wait here still for a very long time because when they arrive they first face the registration in the so-called hotspot camp Moria, and so they still have to stay for a long time in Moria.
Can you tell us something about the situation in Moria? How is the camp built up? What kind of structure is there?
So Moria is completely overcrowded, that's the first problem, and it's probably not a camp like, for example, a German person would imagine a camp, but it's surrounded by barbed wire. It looks like a prison from the outside. Actually, it is not really a prison because it's open for the people to leave, but it does contain a prison, a pre-removal center it's called. So, first of all, we can say like there's people who live inside Moria, like inside the camp surrounded by barbed wire, and then there's the people that are arriving now. Now the number of arrivals is constantly rising again after it has been dropping, live outside in tents, and the others live inside the camp. And then there's the inside, which is on the one hand, the closed area, which is the registration area when they arrive. So many people are detained for 25 days during the whole registration process, or it happens in the first days they arrive, like first, second day, and then they're still detained in there. So they arrive and they feel like a prisoner, right? So they don't feel like someone who's coming and getting protection, but they feel like someone who's criminalized just because of the flight. And then there's this other part in Moria that is very important, which is the pre-removal center, where people are detained who, for example, have been rejected, the asylum claim has been rejected, but also other people who are, for example, considered as so-called troublemakers. So there's a very free way how the police uses this word troublemakers. So some people have been detained and put in there after demonstrations, for example, like protesting the conditions on the island. They end up in this center, and then sometimes they're released, sometimes not. And also people, for example, who applied for so-called voluntary return. So people who are like stuck on the island for months and months and just don't see any future, and then think, okay, it's better to like so-called voluntary return, but then it's not really voluntary because they're detained. So for example, in the Moria pre-removal center, or also on the mainland, there are many pre-removal centers. Yeah, so that's basically part of the structure of Moria, and there's always like within the surrounded barbed wire camp, there's different compounds that also contain different living areas that all pretty much look prison-like.
Can you tell us when somebody arrives, how is the procedure when somebody arrives fresh?
Yeah, so people arriving on the island are transferred at first to the camp called Moria, which is like run by both the Greek state but also the European Union, and also involves some NGOs. And so when they arrive, they're first registered and registered, and then they are detained for a period of time. And afterwards they would actually have the asylum interview, but since the EU-Turkey deal, there is a step put in between. It's called admissibility interview. And in this interview in between, where people still have like to wait for months for, so some are having their first interview after 6 months or something, there's only checked for the people if Turkey can be considered a so-called safe third country or country of first asylum. So this is a step introduced that makes it possible to deport people to Turkey that actually have valid asylum claims, that are like a refugee fleeing war, persecution, whatever. And still they can be in this interview sent back to Turkey if Turkey is considered safe. But as we know, Turkey is not safe for refugees, and especially for people that are non-Syrians. We know that they will be detained again in Turkey, and then from Turkey many of them are deported. So the situation the people are facing is that the deportation is simply like prolonged. They're first detained in Turkey and then deported from Turkey. So Europe can always say, no, we didn't deport anybody unlawfully. If Turkey didn't give them an asylum procedure, like an asylum interview, it's not Europeans' fault but Turkey. So that's the first main problem about this admissibility interview that was introduced. And then we have, if you pass this interview, there is the so-called eligibility interview, where the asylum claim is actually assessed. But in this interview there's also many procedural problems. Like, for example, like the rejection rate in Greece is very, very high, much higher than in other places of Europe, and also on the islands sometimes even higher than on the mainland, because there's this special fast-track border procedure. And the people have to do the interviews in Moria. And there's very many procedure shortcomings, like the interviews sometimes take 8 hours, and the refugees who go there and are really stressed, like suffer from post-traumatic stress, for example, have to go over and over through the questions. And yeah, what happens is that sometimes they are under stress and they make a mistake and then they are quickly rejected. Or even like lawyers working here were witnessing that sometimes there was, for example, a person who was rejected because the asylum service couldn't find the name of his village in Google Maps because there was a spelling mistake or something. So there's like very minor things that are used to also deny people refugee status on this island. And this definitely became much worse since the fast-track border procedure was introduced, and that's a result of the EU-Turkey agreement that was made.
Yeah. How is the situation in Moria when we're talking about food, water, medical problems?
Yeah, since Moria is so overcrowded and there's not many NGOs actually offering service in there, it's very bad. For example, the medical situation, MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, and they pulled out after the EU-Turkey agreement was made because they said we don't want to take part in a system that is just aiming at deporting people and has no regards for like their asylum claims. So there was not many people left to do the medical treatment in Moria. So many people really suffer from grave injuries, like physical injuries, but especially like mental problems are high, because if people come and even if they come healthy, there's people getting very sick on this island because they just have to wait for months and months and they cannot leave the island, right? So they are like frustrated, they're held on this camp, so there's lots of self-harm, for example. That's, yeah, the medical situation, but there's also like very basic goods are missing. For example, food. Like there's people do get food in the camp, but they have to queue for hours in a food line, and it's like quite degrading for people. And there's also not enough. Like there's sometimes starting like fights happening about food because people just don't get enough food. Not everybody gets food. That's a big problem, and shelter is also a big problem. So while it had become a bit better after some time, in the last winter there was people dying from cold. They were freezing to death because there was no appropriate shelter. So there were people sleeping in snow-covered tents. Maybe, yeah, you know the pictures, I think. So there was just nobody who was able or willing to replace them on time. So in the worst winter time. So that's the huge problem. Then also water was often like there was not enough water for all the people, or not enough hygienic facilities, or very dirty facilities, so people also getting sick, not having enough water. Sometimes the water, like there was no warm water in winter, which was a big problem. So definitely, like for staying here for like more than a year, people are like completely not having enough services like as they need for just basic living. And I mean, that's Europe, right? So it's supposed to welcome refugees who had like really traumatic experiences when they fled, and now when they come to Europe, and in Europe they have to see, okay, it's not much better, I'm detained, I have to live behind barbed wire. So yeah, it's a huge problem.
Can you tell us something about other camps that are here on Lesvos?
Yeah, beside this main hotspot Moria, the registration center, there is a camp called Karatepe, and it looks a bit similar to Moria, not as bad, but also barbed wire. And that's made for families mainly, or people that are considered as vulnerable are sent there. So some Syrians live in there. That's one of the camps. And then there's one place that's very different, it's called Pikpa, and it's organized by Lesbos Solidarity, and it only has like very few people living there, like 100 people. But it's completely the opposite. So it's an open space. It's like people live in small huts, and they have many things to do. Like children have lots to do. They can work there themselves. They're not too forced to just stay and wait and hope that something will happen to improve the situation, but they're able to do something themselves. Same with squats, so people squatting empty buildings on the island who self-organize.
This guy with family. He said, I'm with the family and I've been here for a long time. And unfortunately, Greece government, they put us in Moria like we are a prison inside the Lesvos island. It's almost they will put every Kurdish people, put it like this is a prison island. And the point is the refugees is not victim. He said, I'm a journalist. He's a news writer, and he said he's been here for 1 year and 2 months. And we are just staying here, and they waited us to let us like run off from here. And some of people like Lloyd, they said we are as vulnerable to just get out of here. And our kids, his kids is like late from 2 years from the school. And we don't have any economy to help us. And our kids, our kids cannot eat anymore. And our bathroom and our toilet is so filthy. When they clean it, it is just for temporarily an hour to an hour or half an hour. And we don't have any
هيئتك ديت سردان دكا همو بيونيفورمكي جوان همو حمام دشويه كان خوين دكا همو جوان اصلا تاريخون وشتي كيوست
when any organization come here, they wear a nice clothes, and they clean all the bathroom and all the showers, so the organization don't see what they are.
باش يزوري بوي كخوي خويا لو كان بنجات بدل الخزانه كان يخويا حمد لكن حاله خاص بوي ندرس كان بوي كلير نجات.
And a lot of people try to make have a pregnancy so they can be vulnerable and get out of here.
باش كي يكجار زوري خلق يسنا او كلير ما وتوش حاله الرواني بو.
And a lot of people they are inside Moria. They've been here a long time. They have a psychologist problem.
باش كي زوري او خلقي كليرا هيج برشاوروني كان لبرشاور ديارني.
And a lot of people who've been here, they don't have any future.
Can you tell us something about illegal actions by authorities, like pushbacks or?
There's a variety of illegal actions taking place on those islands. Starting with in the sea, pushbacks. Pushback means that a boat with people that actually already reached, like in this example, like Greek waters, is pushed back to Turkish waters, even if the Greek law should already be valid for those people here, and they should be brought to Greece. Sometimes they are by the Greek coast guards or also by the Turkish coast guards pushed back into Turkish waters and then taken back to Turkey. So that's an illegal action taking place. And there's also, I would consider it illegal, like attacking people who try to cross. Europe spent a lot of money for the Turkish coast guards, who are actually supposed to stop people, like intercept them when they try to cross to Greece. And Turkey does this in quite a violent fashion, so there is also videos showing how like the Turkish coast guard circles around refugee boats and with waves. They try to push back the boats, but sometimes they also capsize, so like people end up in the water. Or we've seen that people are like, the boats are stabbed, for example, from some people, and if you're in a rubber dinghy, then the boat is likely to drown. So there's cases where people died in the water when they were tried to stop on the way to Greece. So that's, yeah, and also there's videos where you can see, for example, that small boat by the Turkish coast guards are hitting refugees on the boat and trying to send them back with ropes or with sticks or something like this. So that is one big illegal action, I would say, that is not monitored well enough. And other things that are happening on the island are, for example, police violence, which is a huge problem because it's just everywhere. Like people walking from the camps into town always are stopped on basis of racial profiling very often to check their papers, and often they're taken to the police station. And there's also lots of mistreatment going on, like people coming out being completely beaten up or made to undress, for example. So it's yeah, many problematic things happening. On the other hand, there's also arrests that are not really well founded. For example, arresting people who are on demonstration, just like peaceful protests. There was recently a case where 35 people were arrested and had like really exaggerated criminal charges, who were in Moria and just did a sit-down strike before the asylum office, and they were quite violently attacked by the police. So this is happening a lot on this island, and this, yeah, it's a big problem. And on the other hand, the deportations are also a big issue, like to make sure, or we can see that there's people who are deported where we are not sure if they're actually rejected. So there was even like human rights organizations were reporting, especially with the first deportations happening, that lots of people who were not really rejected with their asylum claims were just put on the ferry to Turkey and simply sent back. And then we also see that in like still now some people are deported even if they shouldn't be deported because, yeah, for example, also because they are vulnerable, they actually have some very bad diseases and they should not be deported. And there was some individuals where it was possible to pull people off the ferry in the last moment when somebody really noticed what was going on and could prove it, and lawyers could go physically to the ferry and in the last moment kind of stop the deportation. But it's only possible when we know actually who is being deported, and this is not properly checked, so it's very hard to follow up. The deportations are taking place very quietly, and it's difficult to monitor and to know who is when deported. So considering that this was like a huge political project to implement this EU-Turkey deal, and was like celebrated like this solution of the so-called refugee crisis, it's like really astonishing that there's no proper monitoring how it actually is going on now. So yeah, that's one of the illegal things happening here.
Which projects are here on the island that support refugees on a legal basis, but also in daily life?
There are lots of different projects. So some people are working in the camps, and those NGOs who are working in the camps also have to play by the rules of the camps for some part. Then others are staying outside on the island, for example in Mytilene, there's a project like from lawyers. There's, for example, advocates abroad on the island or the Liga Center Lesbos, and we try to support refugees, and they do all they can. Many of them are unpaid, but they see that there's just lawyers lacking everywhere. People are going into the interviews and are not prepared for the interviews. They don't know what to say. So that's one project. Then there's projects where it's just aiming at like giving people opportunity to, for example, learn a language or something. There's the Mosaic Support Center here doing something. Then there's projects or people who, for example, try to do sea rescue on this island. Here's Port Tiva, for example. There's a place here in the south called Campfire where people are doing spotting with trying to see the boats. So there's some projects like this, but it's compared to the number of refugees arriving here and having to stay on the island, it's definitely not enough. And then of course there's the self-organized structures also, like the No Border Kitchen is one example, that try to be very level with refugees, so try to involve. There's activists coming from European countries but also who came here as refugees and try to improve their situation in a way and to work together.
Where do you think is the difference between the NGOs and the self-organized groups that are active on the island?
Yeah, I would say it lies especially, like for the example for the No Border Kitchen, that it's the funding is very different, so it's not dependent on some opinion we have to say or not to say, but we can act more freely in what we want to do here. And we can also, that's a strong engagement between refugees who try to challenge the situation and Europeans who both believe that the European border regime as it is now is completely unfair and shouldn't be like this. So it's trying to come out without many hierarchies and just to have a common goal and a common project. So it's not like someone comes here and says, I help you for refugee, but the idea is it's an idea of support and also empowerment.
And in which projects here are you personally involved?
Yeah, I'm mainly here involved in the No Border Kitchen Lesbos and in other monitoring structures, through border monitoring for example. And so the No Border Kitchen Lesbos mainly aims at providing people with food in the first place, because it's like a very basic good, and it's also about autonomy, so people who can cook for themselves and prepare their meals are freer. They are not necessarily forced to stay in the camp because they somehow have food outside. So that's one thing that the No Border Kitchen does. They are like giving out food boxes for people to cook themselves, but also providing meals that are cooked by refugees and non-refugees, like ready food cups for people. And also trying to monitor what's going on with police violence, and also doing support in a way of very individualized. So we get to know lots of people, and so we notice at some point if someone really needs a doctor or needs a lawyer or something. So we try to kind of connect the different people to and support them in improving the situation on their own, like not just having quietly to wait for someone else to help them, but to be able to do something for themselves.
can you do you need more support, and what kind of support does the No Border Kitchen structure need?
We can definitely need support, because on the one hand we don't have like state funding or anything, so we need to kind of get the money for all the work we do. We of course all work unpaid, so it's just we need to somehow buy the food, for example, and all this, so it's like always very, very helpful to just have funding. And then on the other hand, of course, on this island there's like in the border kitchen, but also in lots of other structures, people coming to support here are very much needed. So it's not only about like having like very specific skills, but actually anybody can engage in a way. So it's sometimes it's just helpful to have a driver's license, or it's helpful to have whatever skill, or just to get in contact with people and just get to know what they need. So it's not that we need like specific people, but people who are willing to come and listen what is needed, and not only come like looking from the top on some refugees, but who try to work together with people.
Can you tell us something about future plans of No Border Kitchen and other groups and work you are involved in?
Yeah, there's many plans. For example, extending the monitoring and the support of people who are detained. And on the other hand, also there's a project of some of the locals on the island now to open an info cafe, where we definitely also still need support for, which is supposed to be like a networking point where you get information from, like, for example, people who came here, refugees, can like exchange their knowledge and help themselves, and also like people are getting a sort of orientation what is here on the island, where could they go if they have like medical things they need, or if they need a lawyer, and just to try and explain how the situation is, because the information that is happening in the camps is very, very bad for people. So many people get quickly rejected before they, for example, know how what they need to do for the asylum interview, to prepare like bits of documents or something. So it should be like some sort of networking point and exchange point that we're trying to set up one of the projects now.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And good luck with the project.
Thank you so much.
كل ده هو لباتي هموت يعني بناي بيس مرقي بيدوس وشرك برامبر داعش هر كل بقربانية هر كل شو دربدر ومال ويرانا وكوتش كدو برا أوروبا.
In Kurdish people, like in the name of Peshmerga, they fight the ISIS. They fight ISIS and instead of all the world. And we are giving ourselves and our blood for the whole world, and we coming here and we don't have any right.
كردكان كوشان خاطر لم جزيرة صالوني بود وصال كرد يالنوا لآخر ربط كينو أجزاء صرش كيسجن تكانوا تارنو سناديارا.
All Kurdish people came here as refugees. They put them in about a year or 2 years inside the prison, and finally they give them a deportation and they send them back.
هوادارم صوتي كردكان آهون نوسي كردكان الهي كردكان بقينا همو ولاتان وجيان بلاوي كنوا بابا هاناي كردكان وبين باون الجريك سوتا ومالويران نبي.
We hope that our sound gets to all the world and all the human organization, and we hope that this day we as a Kurdish people to do something, people can do something for us.